Hey there everyone, I'm meteorologist Addison Green here at KHOU with the latest forecast coming on in for Hurricane Ida. We now have seen this system strengthen a little bit more over the course of the past 3 hours since the last time we had an update from the National Hurricane Center, and we will likely see further intensification and growth and development of this system as it makes its approach towards New Orleans, possibly making that landfall just south of the city. So here's the latest information for you. It is a Category 2 hurricane with max winds of 105 miles per hour. There is clearly visible that characteristic textbook eye that we look for a very strong or strengthening tropical system. We will likely see more intensification to continue, especially rapidly, as we're having this system go over very favorable conditions for growth and development. You got to have very warm sea surface temperatures, you have to have a lack of wind shear up aloft, and you need to be free of any land to interact with. That way it'll tug on the system and prevent it from really tapping into those warm waters. So as it's moving over the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico, that is exactly what it is doing. So looking over the past several advisories that we've seen come through from the National Hurricane Center, we look for the pressure that indicates the amount of that we're seeing the system starting to strengthen, developing, starting to get a lowered pressure means that we're having a stronger storm. And as we have seen over the past several updates since back on 8/27 at 1 o'clock Central Time, we have seen that pressure drop 11 millibars during that time frame. Meanwhile, when you have a strengthening system, the pressure is dropping and the sustained winds are increasing. And we've increased from 75 miles per hour, which is a weak or borderline Category 1 hurricane, to 100 miles per hour as of 1 o'clock, which is a strong Category 2. And now we've gone even higher than that, a very strong Cat 2 of winds of 105 miles per hour. The kind of like the ceiling of a Category 2 hurricane is 110 miles per hour. It goes above that to 115. Now we have a major hurricane with winds sustained around 115 and gusts are higher than that. So we are dealing with the very full advisory coming on in from the National Hurricane Center, which means we cover the latest cone, the watches and warnings, the storm details, and the location of where we have Ida. By 7 o'clock, we'll have a partial update, which does not include the cone, but does include the other vital information, except for the gusts. We see that come around at the full update at 10 o'clock. In which case, if you're in the Houston metro area or you happen to be watching online perhaps or watching via our app, you can watch our 10 o'clock news when we'll have the latest information about Hurricane Ida as well as the latest news and headlines in Houston. So here we are looking at the satellite and radar imagery, the infrared satellite imagery. We have that system at 976 millibars. It is moving to the northwesterly direction at 16 miles per hour, which has been its steady pace for the most part, give or take a mile per hour here or there. Over the past day or so, it has made its journey from Cuba, moving over the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. So it has not been running too slow, and it has not been sped up. Sped up would be if it had winds sustained forward motion about 20-25 miles per hour. If it's slowing down, it's usually about 5, maybe 6 miles per hour or so, in which case the slower the system would go over these very favorable conditions for growth and development, the highly likelihood chance we would see of rapid growth and development and possibly sustaining that growth and development for a long period of time, which means bigger storm system and a much more powerful, maybe catastrophic system coming our way. Thankfully, it's moving at a pretty decent pace at 16 miles per hour. As winds sustained, like I said, of 105 miles per hour. And you can see right here, those outer bands starting to be pushed in towards Panama City, Tampa as well, going down the west coast of Florida. And what we're seeing right here in the infrared imagery is we are seeing those cloud tops, and we can see how tall those cloud tops are based on the color palette we see right here, where the taller the cloud tops are, the colder that those cloud tops are, and that means we have rapid growth and development, and they're shooting up those cloud tops from the bottom up, and that means we have a strengthening storm system that's continuously building on up the top of itself right in that center of circulation. So the colder cloud tops, they're going to be into the black to white highlighted areas, and that is generally around the center of circulation, although we do see some of that on the side as we do have this feeder band right here trying to come on in towards the center of the storm system. Watches and warnings, we are already at warnings for many locations, either it's tropical storm warning or hurricane warning all across the mouth of the Mississippi right here. You see right here in yellow, the tropical storm watch up across in Panama City down towards the little bend of Florida right there. But for the most part, they will just have some gusty winds and some rain bands coming on in, as well as some rough surf right along the coastal areas. They'll avoid the brunt of the storm. But as we look right here, the visible satellite imagery, now that we are dealing with full daylight, we can clearly see the sun shining down, and we can see from this high-res satellite imagery that characteristic eye right there. It was around a few times, and then you did see kind of get a little clouded up a little bit here and there, and it may be doing a little what we call kind of like replacing that eye wall right there. And whenever it does that, replacing that eye wall, it means a little bit of some weakening will happen, or at least it will kind of cap any further growth as it starts to generate a new eye. And as it generates a new eye, we're now seeing further growth around that center of circulation, which means we're now having possibly a stronger storm on our hands. But looking right here, though, we definitely can see it's nice and clearly visible. We can see those feeder bands going nicely up across in towards New Orleans, Panama City, feathering out in towards Florida. So it is breathing from the bottom and exhausting. It's kind of like, vent fuel, so to speak, exhausting it up in towards the other portions of the atmosphere. And as a result, we are seeing it continuously maintain that strength and moving forward nicely. We have the water here, the water vapor imagery, as well as the 250 millibar winds. And we can see right here we have a little bit of an upper area circulation going on just towards its east, almost like a little kidney bean shape right there. And to the west, we have this upper area of low pressure that's just kind of hanging out right there for the most part, just towards the southwestern portions of the Gulf of Mexico. What these are both doing, though, are both helping to push Ida further and further northward, going in towards the coastal areas of the North Gulf Coast. What we can also see, looking right here as well, as I'm trying to analyze this imagery, you can see kind of like those cloud bands are kind of like, it's like running into like a little bit of a wall right there. And just to the west, we do see a boundary setting up shop, and that boundary is actually outflow from another hurricane. Yeah, we got another one right there. That is Nora, just on the west coast of Mexico, and it is showing signs of strengthening and developing. And as it is venting itself out, we can see the upper level winds bringing that moisture towards the north and east, and it's running right into a boundary right there, going up across central southern portions of Texas. If we were to see this outflow move on in and kind of cover up what we have going on with Ida, we might see that system weakening a little bit, but it is not. It is just running in towards a very walled in section that is very favorable for it to continue to grow and develop. Just kind of like all the stars are aligning for this system to continue to strengthen and grow without really much of anything getting in its way to possibly weaken it, slow it down, or just cap it off altogether. So unfortunately, this system is going to be going straight up right there towards the mouth of the Mississippi without anything to get in its way, especially in terms of anything to weaken it, in which case if it's going over any land masses, that would certainly go a long way to weaken it. As we look right here at the visible satellite, now I put the wind field graphic on here for you to show you how large that wind field is. And we were just recently hearing from the director of the National Hurricane Center showing that, they're telling, I should say, that they were really concerned about how large that wind field was getting. And we can go ahead and kind of like scan the wind field just to kind of measure to see how long it is. From edge to edge is relatively about 200 miles. So that's a pretty large size wind field. And that yellow highlighted area is tropical storm force winds around 39 plus miles per hour. In the orange highlighted area, that's some strong tropical storm force winds, and that is going to be running at a smaller space, of course, closer towards that general area of circulation. And let me see if I can erase that. There we go. Show you how large that wind field is. It's about 83, 85 miles. And then as we look at the red highlighted area, that's 74 plus miles per hour. So that's Category 1 hurricane. And we have that strong hurricane force wind field about 40 miles or so. As we see systems typically strengthen and develop, we're starting to see the tropical storm wind field maybe not grow as much, but the hurricane wind field does, as we see those really powerful winds in that eye wall around that center of circulation, the eye, getting bigger and larger. And then as the system moves on land, it will start to weaken, and we'll start to see those hurricane force winds starting to back down, but that means they go down in towards tropical storm force winds, and we start to expand that tropical storm force wind field out, which means a larger area is being susceptible to winds of excess of 39 plus miles per hour, and that's sustained. Of course, there are always gusts higher than that. And as the system makes its approach towards its landfall, once it does make landfall, that is just kind of like, you're at the halfway point right there, because you still have to go through the other half of the storm, but meanwhile, up until that eye crosses land, you've now gone through the first half of the storm, which means you had the winds, you've had the rain continuously building on up, and then you're going to get the strongest winds, and then on the back end, much of the same on the way out. So that's why we talk about power outages being a big concern, down trees, debris being tossed all around, because it's the duration of time you have to be dealing with these harsh conditions of the wind, the rain, and if you're closer towards the coastal areas, the rough surf and the choppy waves and the storm surge as well. So unfortunately, hurricanes bring a lot of concerns whenever they start to threaten any landmass moving on in, especially right here in the United States. Now, as you look right here at the hurricane wind field, I need to go ahead and change that banner because it is not Delta, it is Ida. Sorry, I was grabbing a graphic from earlier on. But we can talk about how we are going to be dealing with the hazardous beach concerns throughout this weekend in portions of the coastal areas of the Houston metro area. And pretty much that's a concern all across the area as well. So just bear that in mind. If you're enjoying some nice beach conditions out there, a nice beach day out and about on this Saturday, you're nowhere near New Orleans and the lower Mississippi River Valley area, just bear in mind you go into the Gulf, you want to make sure you swim where a lifeguard is around, because you're going to want to have to deal with that potential of dealing with some rough surf coming in your way. So I'm going to go back here and go back in towards the hurricane wind field, because I really want to show you guys how strong these winds could be. I just want to make sure I can change that banner because it is, again, not Hurricane Delta. So hurricane wind field, let's just say wind field. And let's just simplify for it. There we go. So we got the wind field right there when we're talking about Hurricane Ida. As I wait for this graphic to finalize, we can see right there, as we're going to be putting this through motion, we have that wind field still looking at its current point right now. But let's move forward in time, shall we? As I go ahead and put this into play for you. All right, so as we move forward in time, we can see that wind field getting a little bit larger as we have the system strengthening. So we're now out towards Sunday morning, 2 a.m., and now look at the size of that tropical storm wind field. It has really grown in size all across the northern section of the Gulf of Mexico. As we move forward, going into Sunday late morning, let's say 6, 7 a.m. in the morning hours right there, you're now starting to see that tropical storm wind field starting to push across the lower portion of Louisiana, which means now New Orleans and Houma are starting to get those strong tropical storm winds in excess of 39 plus miles per hour. Meanwhile, the eye of the system is still maybe about 100, 150 miles away offshore as we're watching Ida getting stronger as it makes its approach towards land. Heading into Sunday towards the midday hours, now we're out towards noon. Now we have a very strong major hurricane right there, and there's the coastal areas of Louisiana. And if you're not from this area, you're not familiar with the Louisiana topography, it's very shallow up across southern Louisiana, especially down towards the Gulf of Mexico, where there's a lot of marshes, a lot of bogs, a lot of swampland. So there's already a lot of areas packed with water, and they're pretty much at sea level. Pushing all that water up across and towards the lower portion of the Mississippi River Valley area, it'll be able to easily go over all of those wetlands and possibly inundate several of the metro areas, whether it's Franklin or Houma or even the city of New Orleans, with some possible storm surge. Thankfully, New Orleans, a city that is under sea level, unfortunately, has levees, it has pumps, it's ready to take on any type of surge that may come on in, as well as any type of flooding. I just hope that everything is ready and good to go when this system comes through town, because when it makes landfall tomorrow, it will be 16 years to the day that we had Hurricane Katrina pass by, and we all know what happened to the city, unfortunately, during that day, that tragic day right there. As we move forward in towards Sunday midday, now we go out towards about 1:30 or so, you can see that we have jumped up to a Category 4 hurricane. That's with winds sustained of at least 131 miles per hour, and it's just about to make its landfall right there. It's maybe about 10, 15 miles away. Remember, this is just a forecast and things can change. This is not etched in stone, but we have definitely seen some really good computer data come on in over the past several days, in which case these models have been rather consistent in terms of how accurate they have been. All the information has gone in towards the National Hurricane Center, which goes in towards that iconic cone right there. So we are seeing some very good forecast data right here, but we always know there's a variable here or there that could change as we go forward in time. So that's why we always say, keep your eyes on the forecast as things change. Don't just lock in on one forecast time. All right, moving forward. Past Sunday, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, now we have gone through landfall, and we still have a Category 4, but now look right there out towards those strong tropical storm force winds, that orange highlighted area. Well, now we're starting to see New Orleans getting bombarded with sustained winds in excess of 65 plus miles per hour coming on in across off the Gulf of Mexico, moving in, of course, in a counterclockwise fashion, wrapping around that center of circulation. So that means that we can possibly have those winds going right in towards the narrow waterways right in between Lake Pontchartrain and the Gulf, and it's pushing that ocean, that body of water, the Gulf, in towards Lake Pontchartrain, really chopping up the waves, in which case the city of New Orleans sits on the southern edge of the lake. So that's, of course, not some good news right there if we get some very strong winds and they're not ready to deal with this system. But look also right there, we can see the hurricane plus 74 plus miles per hour, I should say, going right in towards the city of Humo. So they may get the eye to pass right over them, in which case they'll go through the eye wall, and that's the harshest conditions that the hurricane has to deliver. Heading in past Sunday afternoon towards Sunday evening, it's Sunday 8 o'clock right there. We do have still a very powerful Category 4 hurricane. The city of New Orleans has now gone through some very strong tropical storm, if not hurricane force sustained winds. And then by the time we get in towards 10 o'clock, we have that eye wall potentially going right in, or the eye, I should say, going right in towards the capital of Louisiana, Baton Rouge right there. And it sits right on the Mississippi River, and they hopefully are prepared for dealing with the worst this storm has to offer. As we move forward, going in towards the evening hours on Sunday and into Monday morning, we now have the system weakening as it starts to step away from its fuel source, the warm tropical bodies of water like the Gulf of Mexico, for instance. It starts to weaken, it's interacting with land, that will also start to weaken it as well. Now we have a Category 1 by very early Monday morning. But the city of Baton Rouge, still in very strong tropical storm winds, and the city of New Orleans is still as well. But notice that wind field is now starting to shrink. The system is starting to weaken, and we're starting to get those winds to start to break down. But there's still a concern right in towards that center of the storm. As we march forward in towards Monday morning, it's 7 a.m., and we can see that we have the system now making its way away from Baton Rouge, going in towards just east of Alexandria, just west of Hattiesburg in Mississippi. And it's definitely weakening some more right there, but all the while it's still bringing in very gusty winds and rain. And by the time we get in towards Monday, lunchtime or so, now we are no longer dealing with those sustained tropical storm force winds. In fact, we're probably on the verge of seeing that system weaken down towards a depression and then eventually a remnant low. But nonetheless, we're still going to be dealing with those powerful winds for a very long period of time as we start to move forward in through Sunday, Monday, and into Tuesday. So one of the reasons why that we are seeing this system potentially going through rapid intensification, rapid growth and development is because of the sea surface temperatures, like I was mentioning before, but also the lack of upper level wind shear. Initially, there was some as the system was pushing away from Cuba. There was a little bit of some wind shear around, but once it cleared Cuba, it was kind of just like putting your foot down towards the pedal right there of your car, pedal to the metal, so to speak, just full systems go, and it went in towards the Gulf of Mexico, and it went in towards some very upper favorable winds right there. And what I am drawing, that is an upper area of high pressure sitting up aloft above the Gulf of Mexico. And think of it like a big exhaust fan. Well, when you're dealing with an exhaust fan, you're trying to pump stuff out of one area into another. Well, this giant exhaust fan is sitting above the area that the hurricane is going, and as the hurricane is venting, now you have a big exhaust fan up above that can really get it to vent and breathe freely and allow that kind of exhaust fume, so to speak, moving into the upper portions of the atmosphere. Hurricanes love that stuff. They don't want the wind shear to be around. That kind of weakens them and keeps them from growing and developing. Well, you have a giant exhaust fan pretty much over the entire Gulf of Mexico. So that's some big contributing factors into why we are seeing this potential of really big growth and development from a regular hurricane towards eventually a major hurricane, and being only one of a handful of hurricanes to make landfall in Louisiana as a Cat 4 as we go forward into Sunday and into Monday as well. So like I was mentioning before, when you're talking about the wind shear hurricanes, they are vertically stacked engines. Picture the engine of your car right down here. This is the exhaust, the tailpipe. Well, you want a nice clean flow from engine to exhaust pipe when you're driving, so that way your car drives smoothly and you get where you have to go at a nice pace. You don't want anything clogging it up. But whenever you're dealing with a tropical system, you definitely want to not see this if you don't want to be dealing with a monster storm. But unfortunately, in the right ideal conditions, you get that normal hurricane wind flow from top to bottom. Whenever you're in a strong wind field area, strong wind shear area, I should say, it kind of really just kind of like takes that whole system and just tilts it on its side. And now it's having to deal with a little bit of a struggle right there, to say the least. Really strong winds can kind of blow off those cloud tops and kind of shift that tailpipe, so to speak, in an offside direction. That's not what these systems want. They want to be able to breathe and flow nicely. And unfortunately, in the worst situations of wind shear, you can really kind of destabilize a whole storm altogether from really growing and developing, especially as it's out in the open waters of the Atlantic, so to speak. You may get a system that pops up and then it runs into a horrible wind shear area and then just quickly falls apart. All right, let's get in towards that forecast cone, shall we? Now that I've broken down why we are seeing that potential for growth and development, let's see where we do have the timing of that forecast cone going to be. Now, running in towards about noon, 1, 2 o'clock or so, we may be dealing with a potential landfall right there as a Category 4 hurricane with winds sustained of 130 miles per hour. We've seen some modeling information that says we may get stronger than that, maybe a strong Cat 4. Well, it's a very strong hurricane, but a higher category Cat 4 right there in terms of its sustained winds, maybe 140 miles per hour. Although this is some good news right there. It has dropped from some model runs yesterday that had it going up towards 140 miles per hour. So that's some good news right there. If it stays at its forward pace, doesn't get the chance to slow down, then we'll see that potential for it not really exploding way towards the top of the category San Francisco scale going towards a Cat 5, although it's not out of the realm of possibility of not happening. But bottom line, once it goes in towards these waters right here, just offshore of the North Gulf Coast, those are very shallow waters, and we have that water temperature running very high. We'll show you those numbers in just a moment. But as we continue to see the system move on in, like I was showing you before, it will weaken down towards a Category 1 past Baton Rouge, and then it'll start to weaken some more as it pulls away. But I zoom in right here for you because I wanted to show you what was going on in terms of what we have for that potential landfall and where we can see the major metro areas of Louisiana. The city of New Orleans, for instance, is on that dirty side, quote unquote. That's the right side of the system, especially that right front side. And when you have this being in the factor, with like cities like New Orleans right in that dirty side of the storm, you're getting the wind, you're getting the rain, you're getting the surge, as well as the potential of the strongest winds coming on in across that area. So that is unfortunately some bad news right there for the city of New Orleans. And if we get this track to shift a little bit more to the east, you may be having the worst of the winds, sustained winds in excess of maybe 100 plus miles per hour towards that eye wall. But that right now, this current situation has the eye wall going over the city of Houma, which is not good news at all, to say the least. Depends on how much we see this system weakening as it moves further inland. We may get the chance for seeing the harshest of winds not become much more of an issue past the I-10 corridor, which is right about here. We have a Category 1 potentially coming our way by just after midnight Monday morning, 1 a.m. at 75 miles per hour. So we hope that we see some significant weakening of the system after it makes landfall, but I mean, it could really kind of hold on towards that major hurricane status of a Cat 3 or higher, maybe going in past the city of New Orleans and pushing up in towards the I-10 corridor, in which case you still have a lot of populated areas like Lafayette and Mandeville over that way that we have to be concerned with. So those water temperatures I was mentioning, they are running super hot. We're talking about some kind of like really warm bath water type water right there that we have going on. So that pink highlighted area, that sea surface temperatures into the mid to upper 80s. We need at least 80 degrees for these systems to work with in order to see growth and development come on in. The higher the number, of course, the likelihood we'll see rapid growth and development coming into the picture. Depends on some other factors as well. But sea surface temperatures that are running very hot is one of the things that these systems love. And as we go in towards the mouth of the Mississippi, all across the coastal areas of Louisiana, you can see kind of like darkened layer right there, just slightly higher. Well, there are some numbers that are on average 88 to 91 degrees, which is a super warm water right there for a system to utilize. And unfortunately, as it goes over this area, it may start to tap into that more so, especially if it slows down. Another factor that we noticed earlier on was that we had this system moving on in up across some very deep warm water. Typically the sea surface temperature is running that warm. They're running at the surface, maybe down going about 10, 15, 20 feet or so, depending upon different situations. But we don't have to go down too far down. But as these systems move on across the open waters, they start to do what we call upwelling, because they're typically moving at a slow pace, 10, 15 miles per hour, so it's relatively slow. And as they move on in, they start to pick up that thermal energy off the surface, and they also help to bring up colder water from down below in the deepest portions of the ocean and the Gulf. So as you're moving that thermal energy from the surface, you're now allowing that colder air to move on up towards the surface. And sometimes we can see kind of like footprints in the sand, so to speak, of where our tropical system has been. It'll take some time, but eventually the water will warm itself up. Right about here, that's where we had Hurricane Grace made its pass past Yucatan Peninsula about 2 weeks ago and go towards central Mexico. So there was a good amount of some cooling in those waters, but they have already started to bounce back. Here, we have not had any storms go through in quite a while. So we can easily see Ida tapping into some untapped resources right there, and it's kind of like, going towards an open buffet. Just keep going as long as you can keep eating. All right, here we go, and towards the wind forecast and wave heights. So going in towards 5 o'clock today, we can already start to see potentially these forecasted wave heights to be in that yellow highlighted area about 25 to 30 feet. These are some very large swells. And as the system continues to grow and continues to decrease that surface pressure, it'll continue to put more weight on the surface of the ocean, which will allow more choppiness of those waves as those winds pick up in intensity. But what we can see right there, yeah, definitely having these close lines right there, isobars, and isobars, dealing with those iso contours right there, and we're dealing with those waves weakening over time, but you can still see some choppy wave activity is found pretty much all across the coastal areas of Florida as we go throughout this afternoon. Well, let's put this through motion, shall we? As we go forward in towards the early morning hours coming up on Sunday, we now have those strong waves starting to push on in towards the mouth of the Mississippi, in towards coastal areas of Mississippi. There's Mobile and Mobile Bay. Now, the waves are getting very choppy, and we're now starting to see them increase in height. It's not so much the case on the left-hand side of the system as we have that wind coming on down in the opposite direction, and those winds are generously, I should say, lighter in intensity. Let's keep going forward, shall we? Pushing in towards the morning hours tomorrow, almost towards lunchtime on Sunday, and then we can see that landfall going in as a Cat 3, maybe a Cat 4, and we see that we go from dealing with really strong waves at about, say, 33 to 37 feet on average up across in this area right here. As we have the system move closer and closer to the land, we're now starting to see less and less wave interaction, wave heights, but nonetheless, still, that forward motion of the system is now pushing all that water up in towards the land masses right there, the southeastern portion of Louisiana. So, yeah, you're already seeing all that high wave activity now make its way across those swampy marshlands, and that's not good for anybody that is in those areas that could not or did not want to leave and evacuate and get towards higher ground. Heading in towards the evening hours on Sunday, the system has definitely made its landfall. It's moving on past New Orleans. We're seeing the waves still running rather choppy out there by Monday morning, just offshore. And then we can start to see over time the waves going a little more calmer. But what I also wanted to show you is that as we see the system approach, and I was mentioning earlier that we're having this rough wave activity and we're having this wind coming on in a counterclockwise direction, right? It's coming in off the Gulf of Mexico, going in towards Lake Pontchartrain right there. Well, it'll continue to do that for several hours. We have that forward motion of that water pushing in towards the lake and moving in towards one side of the lake. Once we have the system move past Lake Pontchartrain, now we're having those winds no longer coming out of this direction. They're now coming in out of this direction, out of the west-southwest direction. So now you're taking all that water you piled up on this side, and now you're moving it towards the other side. So you're almost like a little bit like a wash machine type effect, getting a little sloshing going on from side to side. Well, we're not talking about, the water content of a wash machine or a bathtub. We're talking about a pretty good sized lake. So you're moving all that water from one side to the other side, and you're moving it, jostling it back and forth over and over for several hours. So that's where any structures along the coastal areas could be seeing some significant damage, as well as possibly pushing that water in towards the city of New Orleans, especially if there are any low points over that way. All right, speaking of storm surge, this is definitely a huge factor whenever we talk about systems causing potential life hazard situations right there. You can see right here that we go in from dealing with a scale of 2 to 4 feet towards 11 plus feet, and that's in those red highlighted areas. And this has increased in the potential of seeing more widespread storm surge issues over the past day or so. These white highlighted areas, that's where we have the levees up in effect over near Golden Meadow. We have one near Morgan City, and we have a whole lot, of course, around the city of New Orleans, in which case there's the Mississippi River flowing in through the city. So these areas should be able to withstand the storm surge and the potential flooding rains that are coming around. But definitely a lot of low-lying areas outside of those levee systems are susceptible towards that storm surge, pushing that water off the Gulf of Mexico and pushing it further inland over time, making it a big concern all the way up several miles, to say the least, going up across the Mississippi River and other various tributaries across that way. Even coastal areas of Mississippi on the north side of Lake Pontchartrain could be dealing with some big storm surge concerns as we go forward in through Sunday and even in towards Monday as well. On top of the storm surge concerns, the gusty winds concerns, there's also, of course, the heavy rain. We have a tropical system that is packed with moisture. There's so much in this large system that is at least 200 miles in diameter. As we move forward, you can see 3 to 5, 5 to 7 inches potentially coming on in, all in this highlighted area. But also, there will definitely be some 6 to 12 inch plus totals coming in, especially just right side of the track, which case the city of New Orleans is right there. So yeah, there are not any good scenarios right now for the city in terms of where the system will go and if you can survive running out the clock, so to speak, without having to deal with the worst of it. You're going to get the wind, the rain, the storm surge, everything. And also, something that kind of gets overlooked sometimes, but certainly does get mentioned, is the potential for seeing severe weather. You can get some really powerful wind gusts on top of that, but also water spouts that eventually could move on land, and then you get tornadoes. And typically these tornadoes are on the weaker side of the enhanced Fujita scale, an EF0, EF1, maybe an EF2, but they are extremely hard to see and they are typically short-lived. So you can't go outside and see, oh, there's a tornado. No, it's wrapped in a ton of tropical moisture, and you get that whenever you have a landfalling tropical system on the right front side as we get those outer bands to pinwheel on land, get that friction, show some rotation going on, and that could be a big concern all across those coastal areas from the mouth of the Mississippi, pretty much all the way out in towards the little elbow right there of Florida. But we can see easily 6 to 12 inches of rain come on down, and a lot of locations have already had, especially in Tennessee, where we had not too long ago once in a 1,000-year flood event in Waverly, Tennessee, where that city saw just over a foot of rain come down within, it felt like minutes, hearing reports over that way, which is just west of the city of Nashville. And that's unfortunately where that track has the system going, bringing an additional 3 to 5 inches of rain towards already, and on top of that area, many waterlogged areas across the southeast. And that's why there is that flood potential. We're showing you this graphic coming on in from NOAA. There is a marginal chance of flooding today. There is going to be a much more higher chance, to say the least, by Sunday for tomorrow. The city of New Orleans is in that purple magenta highlighted color, so is much of southern Louisiana. That's a high right there. That is a 4 out of 4 on our category scale. So flooding is extremely likely to be occurring and to be occurring widespread. As we watch the system move further inland, we are now seeing that flooding being a situation of concern not just in lower Louisiana, but all across the entire state of Mississippi in towards Alabama, pushing northward in towards the Ohio River Valley. I mean, it's only a 1 out of 4 right there marginal in that green highlighted area, but nonetheless, like I said, they don't need a slow-moving, decaying tropical system that's raining itself out over some hilly terrain, river valleys as well, and some areas that have already seen too much rainfall come through over the past several weeks or so. So the city of New Orleans is, of course, not a stranger for seeing these powerful hurricanes come through. As you look right here, going towards those historical tracks, we want to mention a few of them. Of course, well known, unfortunately, Katrina was a Category 3 hurricane in 2005, and that's where it made its pass right there. And I know what you're saying, you're thinking like, well, wait, I thought it was a Cat 5. It was a Cat 5. It was a Cat 5, made about 100, 150 miles offshore, but as it made its approach towards making its landfall, it weakened to a Cat 3 right there. The city of New Orleans dodged the extreme worst of the winds as they were just to the east of that track and went in towards Mississippi with this widespread wind damage. But unfortunately, New Orleans got the rain damage, and then the levees broke, and then we had the flood damage going on in there. There was Betsy in 1965 that took a similar track that we have Ida potentially going, of course, this year, and in which case you're now putting the harshest conditions over in towards New Orleans. So it's been quite a while that we had a Category 4 hurricane making almost a direct impact in towards the city of New Orleans in that southern portion of Louisiana. So in fact, there's been 13 major hurricanes that have come through since the mid-1860s, if I'm not mistaken, but these are definitely the most notable ones right there. All right, so what to take away from all of this now that we're wrapping everything up? Timing of the landfall is going to be Sunday early afternoon from Ida, making its push in towards the coastal areas of Louisiana, likely coming in through as a Category 4. But regardless if it's a low-grade Category 4 or a high-grade Category 3, it's still a very powerful system that is not to be taken lightly. Storm surge of 7 to 11 plus feet, tornadoes, as well as 6 to 12 plus inches of rain are all likely to be occurring. And this is unfortunately just the beginning of us entering the busy season of the Atlantic tropical season for 2021. As we move past mid to late August and towards September, we typically see the peak of activity pop on up around the 12th to the 17th or so in September. But nonetheless, that's when we can get wave after wave coming in off the African continent. We can get waves and storms developing in the Caribbean, and even in the Gulf of Mexico, and even off the coastal areas of the southeast United States. As we go forward in time in towards November, we start to see conditions becoming less conducive for tropical development. We get less tropical waves. The waters gradually start to cool down. We have a little more wind shear around, more widespread. We have a little bit of a spike right there in about mid to late October, give or take, as we find some systems popping up a little closer to home where those waters are a little warmer. Western portion of the Caribbean, western portion of the Gulf of Mexico, and off the southeast coast of the United States. And then by the time we go towards Thanksgiving, we are starting to see everything wrap on up in late November. But of course, in years past, 2005, for instance, we have seen systems form and develop and grow into strong systems, strong tropical storms, strong hurricanes, even pushing in towards December and January. That was 2005 right there. Definitely a year that will never be forgotten. So any thoughts, questions, or concerns, you can find me right here on my social media accounts on Twitter, Instagram, as well as Facebook. And we will be here at Channel 11. The weather team right here at KHOU will be here answering any of your questions throughout the duration of Ida. You'll have all four of us here tomorrow on Sunday for that landfall. And then we'll be here with you in general as we go forward in throughout the tropic season.